And now I'd like to begin the show with Pat Brevard, Scratch Building an Engine House. And all I have to say is this is quite the model. And excited to have Pat present it. Pat is part of our technical support and a modeler. So, Pat, have at it.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it very much. Um, this model is completely scratch built from the bottom up. So I thought I'd give this to you tonight and hopefully I don't put you to sleep in doing it. So everybody can see this all right. This is the first machine that I used for many years. I've had this thing about 25, 30 years, and it's a Dremel table saw. And this machine did all the work for cutting as fine as I needed to get to put the work to the wood to the model itself. I converted the machine over to a better sawdust pickup by adding a piece of cardboard along the back side of the table saw and a hole for the vacuum to hook to it. And I also raised the fence by adding this piece of wood along here. This is quite the machine. I've always enjoyed working with it to do fine work. And one of the bad things that the Dremel table saw had was that this hole right here used to be pretty wide and pretty deep. So I added a piece of plastic to it, as I did years ago. I added this piece of plastic to prevent any of the small pieces of wood like this from sliding down inside between the blade and the hole itself. It
We're
becomes
not
very
seeing your
dangerous.
cursor, but
Pardon me?
we're not seeing your cursor.
Can you see it there now?
No,
Oh, just a minute. Oh. Anyway, if you look at where the saw blade is, there's a piece of plastic that's running on the hole that the saw blade is in. I put that there to prevent any kind of small pieces of wood that you see there now from sliding in between the blade and the hole in the table saw. This here is the laying the sheeting on the. I used uh, foam core board, and it's got like a plastic sheeting on either side of it, almost like plastic, and it's very shiny. So what I did to prevent any problems with it, I sanded it lightly and sprayed it with a top coat of gray primer. And this prevented the glue, or gave the glue something to bite to when you're adding the pieces of wood to it. And here you can see the size of strips that I used between the windows and the doors. And there's quite a few of them along here. As you can see, it took a lot of, it almost drove me crazy. Let's put it that way. I'm already there anyway, so I don't worry about it too much. Anyway, as you can see, every one of these pieces are individual, and I glued them all along, both all the way to the top of the board itself. Here you see a larger view of the foam core board, and I'm applying all the wood to it. And I used a carpenter's glue, a yellow carpenter's glue, to glue the boards to the foam core board. And you can see some of the equipment that I used here was the regular carpenter's knife and squares. And you can see a lot of the leftover pieces I have from cutting and fitting. Here's some of the weights that I use. Those are lead shots that they use for making bullets with. All these lead shots are heavy enough that it would hold down the boards that I placed on this for the sheeting. And this here wall you see in front of you has got the 2 engine house doors that I had. Just for information, this engine house is 8.5 inches high, so you can consider the height of those doors are pretty high. And the width of this whole thing is over 17 inches. So that there is about the width of that wall you see with the doors in it, the doorways. And the length of the building is actually 33.25 inches long. And overall, there are 28 windows. Here you can see one of the side walls that go along the back of the unit. And if you look at the very edge of that wall, you'll see that some of this stuff is over set out a little bit, so that it's longer than the wall itself. And the reason why I did that was so when I put the walls together, they would fit tightly, and I wouldn't see any seams at the edges and the corners. And you can see the lumber that I cut with that table saw. There was a lot of pieces went on there. Here you see the base of the unit. You'll see the rail there just below those walls. You can see the rail, it's embedded into the foam core board. So in order to strengthen the foam core board from flexing too much, I laid a piece of bristle board underneath the whole base of it and glued it on. So it strengthened the base. And you can also see some more of the lumber that I was cutting. And if you look closely at one of the walls, you can see the edges of the wall are higher or longer, and that's for the corners. Now on the inside, after all the lumber was applied for the sheeting, I painted it with a off-white from Floqual that I had left. I had several bottles of it, so I used it all up. And I painted all the walls inside with a white, off-white finish. And I wanted it to look rough. That's why you see some of the grooves of or some of the spaces between the sheeting is not fully tight together. Then you can see the studding that I cut for between the bottom and top of the walls. And I use this here silicone container to put my glue in. It doesn't stick to it at all. And I use the pointed pen here to apply the glue to the edges of the 2x4 or the studding that I put in there. And of course I used the tweezers too. Now I needed a place to hang all the rafters since there was about 32 of them. And I found I just used the pegs on this on my for hangers, and I just applied each one of them to the pegs to hold them up. And there they all are on the bench that I was working on, a table itself. And there's some plastic strips and some more of the wood strips that I use, some of the rafters and the walls. Here you can see an overall view of the walls after they were finished. In between each one of the stud work, or the wall studs that I put in, I made sure that I had cross bridging so that it strengthened the walls itself. And then of course I painted all the stud work the same color as the sheeting. And you can see on the ends of the walls that overlay that I had. There's a clearer view. On top of the walls, you can see that I used a heavy 4x4, or what you would call a 4x4, along the top and bottom to strengthen the ends and the tops. Feel free to ask me a question if you like, if I'm going too fast. Along the top of the wall, you can see the overlay that I had on the outside wall to come up above and below. And all this was done so that when I added anything to it, it fit tightly and you couldn't see any seams. There's the outside of the wall. That's where I used this, it's almost like wallpaper. And they call it bumpy paper. And I also used a sticky blockwork foundation to the bottom of the walls. Got it upside down here. The door is upside down. And then I used along between the blockwork and the paper that I used, the bumpy paper, I used the plastic strip. And that's your, what you call it, the sill between the stonework and your blockwork. That's to make it more presentable as the fact that that's what you do when you put in stonework. It's usually on a sill. Now here you see what I did with it all after I had it painted and finished on the inside. I weathered it with a black powder mixed with some alcohol. And I just applied it with a stiff brush, and where it was too much, I would take a cloth and I would rub out the extra in between the studding. So it makes it look like it has a lot of smoke collected. Then the bottom half of the wall, I used a gray color, a darker gray color, bluish gray color. And that's something like what I saw in some roundhouses that I built or saw in real life. They kept the bottom part a dark color and the top part, the white color, was to keep it lighter inside. Above above that wall, you'll see some of the lumber I used. It was mainly basswood and mixtures of cedar and redwood. And another picture of it. Turn the right side up.
Pat, I have a question.
Go ahead, Steve.
I see you put the windows in from very early on in the build. What was your reasoning behind that? And did that cause any real problems when you went to stain the inside? And I
taped
assume
it.
that they were custom made. You made those windows yourself?
The windows, no, they're from Tichy.
It's from Tichy, okay.
Yep. No, I covered them with tape.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Pat, I got
And
a question.
excuse me, I didn't put the plastic in right away. I kind of covered them with tape and then I just painted it all.
Okay, all right.
I'm sorry.
Pat, I have a
Okay.
question about the exterior. The paper that you use, you call it a bumpy paper?
Yeah, it's like a wallpaper that's sold from a
was it
place in
embossed?
Czechoslovakia.
Was it embossed with the bricks on there?
It's embossed with the stonework, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you feel it, you almost think every individual one is there. It's a beautiful paper. It does a nice job. They got it well done.
I've used the same stuff on my railroad also.
It's amazing
great
stuff.
stuff.
Yep.
It takes a while to get it, but
Yeah. And I found to apply this paper to the foam core board, I roughed it a little bit on the foam core board. I kind of sanded it lightly. And then I used a water-based contact cement. And when that baby went on there, it was done. So I used to put it on a little larger than what I needed, and then I would trim it with my carpenter's knife.
Who's the manufacturer of that paper?
I don't know. If you go to Etsy online, ETSY, I think it is,
Okay.
and you'll find it.
Just under bumpy paper.
Pardon me? I had somebody ask.
This is Andy. If you don't find it on Etsy, go to eBay.
Yeah.
I looked it up.
I got a better price on Etsy than I did on eBay.
Okay, I couldn't find it on Etsy.
There's a sheet of it right there. That's the full size of the sheet. So I had to work with what I had, and I kind of joined it together, and you'll see what I did at the joints. This here particular wall, you can really see that small wall that I have there, the overlay of the sheets on the outside, so that when you put it together, you wouldn't see any joints when you join the walls together. And that particular hole in that wall is the entrance of the to the shop, the machine shop in that building. And there's one large door that goes on that on the outside. And of course, I built a deck inside and outside. There's the pits. Boy, that's the pits. Anyway, those two pits were already in my layout. There's actually 4 of these units that you see here, 4 units like that. And I had them in there for several years, and I had the base already cut for them with the track work, but I didn't have the rest of the building built. And you can see them here, they're all lit up. Here's the flooring inside the engine house. It's a mixture of cedar, redwood, and basswood. And I stained them lightly with a light brown stain, just to give it that, like it blended together well. You can see where I used those lead weights to hold that flooring tight together when I glued it in place. And the big secret to work with foam core board, I found you have to sand it. Otherwise, you very lightly so that your glues will stick properly. You see here where I've been using a piece of sandpaper just to make sure they're kind of even. You don't want them too high or anything like that. You want them fairly even at the joints. So I use that. And you can see where the track was embedded in that foam core board. That's the foam core board. There's your track embedded in that foam core board. But you can see how I had to hold that stuff pretty tight. There's the finished floor. Yeah, it didn't turn out too bad, I thought, anyway. But you see, there's the 4 holes for the pits. Another picture. And if you look closely, you'll see the nail holes at the ends of the joints. On every one of these. Every board has a nail hole at the end of the boards.
How long did you make the boards?
Some of them were, I don't know, about 10 inches, 12 inches, 6 inches. It all depended on how it worked out. I tried to make it so that it would, you know, flow along. And I never tried to make the joints at the same spot, because that's normally the way you do flooring. And you don't want it at the same spot because it strengthens the floor if you go beyond those joints. And you can see some of the wiring I had going down the side of the end, the corner of the wall at the very end. And there's the end wall. And you can really see the nail joints or the nail holes right there.